Hello, welcome. Welcome, happy hour to session 3. And by request of the poll that I asked the other day, drinking for boredom seemed to rank number 1. So I decided to make this session based on that concept. So if you're drinking because you're bored, and I put bored here because it may not necessarily be that you're bored, it might be something else. So that's what we'll look at. Bored kind of implies that you have nothing to do or nothing to think about, or you don't have interest. But I just don't think that's true about any of you in this group based on what I've been reading and what you've been sharing. Your lives are so full and there's so much going on, and everyone has really full lives. There's really no reason to be bored. And I don't really agree with that adage that if you're bored, it's because you're boring. I don't think that's true necessarily. I don't think you're boring. I also don't necessarily think that you're bored. Instead, I think that this is what is happening. And I also used to drink to entertain myself. And those were really the times that I needed to take a good, serious and intentional look at, because those were a lot of throwaway times, a lot of waste of my time, a lot of waste of my energy. So what was really happening though was I was having serotonin and dopamine dips, and I believe that that is the case for most of you, for us. So, alcohol is a drug. We're not even going to skirt around that. Alcohol is a drug. It modifies your brain chemistry, it modifies the systems of the body, and it is used to alter mood, which is pretty much the definition of a drug, using something to alter your mood or your state on purpose. So, if you're having a hard time having your AF days because your trigger is boredom, because you feel bored without drinking, this is really a catch-22, because what I would prescribe is that you need more AF days. If you're having a hard time not following through on your AF day because you just get bored in that witching hour, or you feel like, oh, there's nothing to do, what you're experiencing is a dip in your dopamine and a dip in your serotonin. And the way to, and because you're used to artificially stimulating those neurochemicals with drinking to get that quick fix, when your body, your nervous system, your brain would normally naturally do that anyway, but drugs interfere with that process. And so what I'm recommending is that you do more AF days, or you push through the 1 or push through the 2 if you haven't gotten to the 1 or 2 point yet. ¿Por qué? Because ingesting alcohol initially spikes your levels of dopamine and serotonin, right? Your feel-good chemicals, the relaxing, the reward chemicals that feel like pleasurable. We're going for the pleasures. They stimulate the pleasure centers of our brain. So alcohol is a long-term depressant, but it's a short-term stimulant because it activates the dopamine in the reward center of your brain, the dopamine and the serotonin, which are the feel-good chemicals, but in like really excessive amounts. So when we take a drink, then we feel that whoosh, but then a high is always accompanied by an equal or even more profound low. And the lows over time are what can lead up to people feeling depressed, or encouraging a state of depression by going through this cycle of really high highs and then really low lows, and really high highs and really low lows. Because what you want is more of that steady and that natural kind of up and down, ebb and flow that would naturally happen anyway. But when we're doing it with drugs or with an alcohol, when we're doing it to ourselves, we're interrupting the body's natural rhythm and cycles to modulate and modify its own balance of hormones and chemicals. Okay, so if you relied on alcohol for a long time to modify your mood, your body may feel like it's actually dependent on alcohol to regulate its own brain chemistry. So what happens after long-term alcohol use is that you're not even any longer getting that initial high. Notice, right? A lot of us have built up a pretty high tolerance compared to what it might have used to have been. Like, I remember getting wasted off 2 beers when I was like in my early 20s, my teenage years. And that just could no longer happen after a while, right? Because you build a tolerance, you need more and more to get to that initial feeling, even though it can never really ever get there again. Um, but then subsequently, you're going to go low, 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 and it's going to bottom out. So you might feel like you're bored or disinterested. That might be the sensation or the mood or the feeling that you're identifying with the really simple kind of dailiness of life. But it's because your body and your brain have become addicted or accustomed to an artificial spike in dopamine and serotonin. And this article that I put down here, this link here, is a really good article from Rehab Center, and it just talks about drugs in general, but alcohol being a drug is responsible for this same sort of process. So again, it's not necessarily that you are bored or you are boring. You're experiencing a low that is then making you feel like you need to stimulate that artificially to get even back up to a feeling of normalcy. I really remember those days of like really, really, really feeling low and down. And then a drink would just not even take me high. It would just make me feel normal. So you've probably experienced a similar thing. So that's what's really, I think, is happening. What does serotonin do? Well, among other things, serotonin is responsible for mood regulation. And when it's in balance, it reduces feelings of depression and anxiety. But again, as we just mentioned, if we're artificially stimulating it really high, then it's going to go down really low, like this, as opposed to like this. My computer doesn't like me. Okay. So alcohol may be able to temporarily numb our discomfort, but alcohol is also going to numb everything else, which is the big bummer. We use alcohol to numb our anxiety or to stimulate us or to de-stress us, but it also will take away our ability to feel the sensitivities of happiness and joy. So that is also why you might be feeling bored or disinterested, because you're not, I don't say losing your ability, but your sensitivity for feeling pleasure in simple things has been muted and has been dulled, just in the same way that you've been able to mute or dull your anxiety or your discomfort, right? So it's non-discriminatory. Alcohol is just non-discriminatory. It's just going to lower our senses and our sensibilities to experience the world with our five senses, with our body, right? It turns down those centers of, in the brain so that our senses are not as sensitive. So we don't feel as much discomfort and anxiety, depression, etc. But then we also don't feel as much joy and happiness and natural pleasure. Things don't entertain us the way that they used to, right? This is also why people lose interest in hobbies that used to bring them a lot of pleasure. It's hard to find pleasure in it once we've created this kind of roller coaster system with our neurochemicals. So also what happens, which is a bit of a trap, is then we feel really bored in our lives. Our lives become like not as fun, not as interesting without the alcohol. But then we've also attached alcohol to really simplistic things. I know I definitely did this, like folding laundry or cleaning the house or doing work-related things on the computer, or something that might otherwise, like, oh, I don't really want to do this. What would make this interesting? I'm just going to drink so that this will be fun for me. Right? That's the story that will then lead us to the action that will then have us do that thing. And once we've done that thing enough times, we just associate the two together. For me, because I have so much laundry in my house, I would open wine and fold laundry, and it would take me forever because I was like constantly picking up and putting down a glass. And my association with folding laundry was heavily accompanied by drinking wine, also cleaning my house, also putting my kids to bed, right? XYZ, because it just becomes a ripple effect. We think that alcohol will make these things that we do in our lives, these simple things that we do in our lives, more fun or more interesting. But I'd also like to pose the question, like, why do we have to be entertained all the time? I look at my kids and their peers and how many of them, I'm a little more maybe rigid with my kids, but are on tablets and phones all the time, and like they have a really hard time just being or using their imagination to entertain themselves or using the environment around them to feel engaged and stimulated, because we are altering the way that our brain is functioning by throwing a stimulant at it all the time, or trying to modify the environment or entertain ourselves with something that could just be really pleasurable if we practice being present and aware. Yeah, so why do we have to be entertained all the time? You know, like cleaning the bathroom and folding laundry is just a part of life. And the more we can bring ourselves present to these things that we're drinking to accompany, they can be pleasurable again. They can be nice again. We can practice just being in our body and breathing and listening to the birds, or taking in beautiful sights with our eyes, right? We can come back into the pleasure senses of the body without alcohol, but it does take some time for those neurons to refire in a way that feels natural and balanced, and in a way for them to regulate our neurochemicals in the way that they're designed to do. So the answer for all of this is AF days, regular AF days, and preferably them together. Because you'll notice if you have one and then you drink, the second one is harder to get to. But if you string them together, you already feel good. You already feel like, oh, I can do this. 2 in a row is easier than one and then a drinking day and then another one, in my opinion. And also for this reason. And you're giving your brain, the neuroplasticity of your brain, a chance to really work better instead of fighting against it. It's almost like you have to push the wheel uphill twice instead of having to push the wheel uphill and then let it roll. Okay, all right. Let's look at volume, at consumption volume and alcohol use disorder. I diagnosed myself. I think I definitely did have alcohol use disorder, and I was probably right in here in between the two, between dependence and between abuse or use, harmful use. That was definitely me. Hazardous alcohol use, also definitely me. And I feel like I'm right down here between these. Not a non-drinker, but I could drink. I could never drink again if I wanted to, which feels amazing to me. But I do still drink, and I've moved into low risk alcohol consumption, which would be my dream and wish for all of you as well, is to move into low risk alcohol consumption on your drinking days, and totally dry for, like, ideally you would do 3 or 4, even 5 alcohol-free days every single week, just as part of your lifestyle for the time being, until you move into another phase, which maybe ends up like drinking once a month or drinking not at all, right? To like stay on the trajectory of improving the habit. Because you'll notice you'll get in the pattern of like, okay, can do 1 day a week. But then you're creating like a different state of normalcy, which then might also feel boring and disinteresting. So to expand upon what you're growing into and the journey of becoming more of yourself by leaving alcohol further behind, what I would love to see happen to everybody, but especially you all, because you're in this group. So the low risk drinking guidelines: if you drink less than 14 units a week, this is considered low risk drinking. And these stats are from the UK, from Scotland, actually. So you can look at this link down below if you like. The US was a little bit different, and Canada's was a little bit different. But I found this one to be like a nice happy medium between them all, the ones that I know about and have looked at. So 14 units, I think we're mostly wine and cocktail people here, beer for sure, but these are the measurements that are recommended for low risk drinking: 6 pints of beer, 6 medium-sized glasses of wine, or 7 double measures of spirits. And this is on a weekly basis. So 6 glasses of wine, I drink that in a day, no problem, times 7, right? So the idea though is to make that your quota, the max that you would do, and how would you spread that out over your drinking days? So say you wanted to have drinks over the weekend, right? It might be 2 or 3, Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Think of a plan that like really feels good for you, and see how close you can get to that by the end of this month, right? So if you've repeated the same pattern for the first 2 weeks, expand on, I would really encourage you to expand on that this week. Give yourself an additional AF day, or bring your drinking down to a level that is closer to the low risk drinking guidelines. And also, again, I've said this before, I'm not a big like drink counter, but you can tell how much you drink without really counting drinks. You know what I mean? Like, you don't, I think it's important. I think it definitely has its place to measure and to count, but I also feel like that breeds some sort of like wild obsession, like a counting calories diet might. And I'm just more of a fan of listening to your body and tuning in with your body. And like, you can feel that corporeal sensation when you're like, when you've hit buzz, and when it's like, that should be the place where you reside. But also, because alcohol is a drug, it seeks more of itself, and your brain wants more of that dopamine hit, which is why it can keep going and keep going and keep going, but is never, ever, ever going to achieve the sensation that you're going after. It's absolutely impossible. And that's why it seems like it's just a never ending cycle of, you just can't get enough on times when you felt like that, right? Yeah. So to just really be aware of that tipping point, and to let it ride out through the tail end while you're still in consciousness. And what that means is, don't drink up to the point where you just like go to bed and you're like, oh, I just can't drink more, I just gotta go to bed. You become familiar with what it feels like to ride off the end of the high. So you have a glass of wine, instead of getting another one, stay with the sensation of, yeah, I feel like getting another one, but like, actually, what does this just feel like in my body? The amount that I've had, this one drink that I've had right now, what does that feel like? And can I be okay with just seeing as it changes and as it morphs onto the tail end of it, and as I slide out of it, right? You can like come back into sobriety after a drink. And the thing about alcohol is that it just really doesn't last very long. And that's why the initial high, it doesn't last very long. And that's why we keep going back for more and more. But therein the trouble lies, right? We have to be okay, which is why I say we have to be okay with not being entertained all the time. We have to be okay with just being. We have to really be okay with just being people inside of our human bodies, and like exploring the life that we are in on the planet and the time that we're in. I think that is the key. I think that is the key to success in most areas, but especially for those of us who are inclined to drinking, to change our reality. Be okay with the reality that you're in, and you won't be bored. So breaking the association of mundane activities with drinking. You could add many things to this list, just the simple things that you do in life that you've paired alcohol with. For me, folding laundry, as I said, also doing dishes. Watching TV is a huge, is a big pitfall, because you're checking out and you're in like an alpha state when you're watching TV, which is passive. And so you're not really aware of even how much you're drinking, right? Or if like you eat a whole bag of potato chips while you're watching a movie, it's like, where'd it go? Did anybody eat these with me? No, you did it, but you were checked out while you were doing it. So I really recommend, don't drink while you're watching TV for that reason alone, because it completely checks you out of your intake and your own experience. Going for a walk with a drink, I used to do that all the time, but like, why do we need that? It's so beautiful out. There's nature, there's other people, there's sound, there's life happening. Why do we need alcohol to make that more interesting, right? So the name of the game really is like, how interested can you be in the world around you without having to change or modify it with alcohol? Sitting outside, just simply sitting outside. I used to take a drink to go sit outside as like the excuse to go sit outside, which is also why I used to smoke, like, so I could go outside. Why can't you just go outside anyway? Why can't you just sit in a chair out on your porch or in front of your house and just like close your eyes and feel the world moving around you? That seems actually more interesting than sitting out and checking out, right? Or sitting by a pool, I know is a huge one, a big association. And also work-related tasks at your computer, drinking wine in coffee mugs. My husband does that, and I wish he wouldn't, but like he drinks so much more wine than he would if he wasn't also, or that's also a form of being in a flow state, or depending what your work is, right? If you don't like your work and you're using alcohol to make it more interesting, or if it is interesting work, it's like, why do you need the alcohol to go with it? So your tasks for this week, your assignment, your fun homework, would be to add an AF day, and also break the association of mundane activities with drinking and allow yourself to be a little bit bored. Allow yourself to get re-engaged with the things that you really love to do, like hobbies or exercising or rearranging your furniture or gardening or whatever it is. Do you really need the drink to make that thing more interesting, that thing that you actually really like doing? And you can remind yourself of actually what's happening is that you're having a dip in serotonin, and to let that ride out. And the more AF days you can give yourself, more that will naturally balance. It's windy. I hope that was helpful for you. I look forward to this week. I'm also having an AF week, probably right through Friday. And so hit me up with your questions. And I look forward to communicating with you all super soon.